I have once again finished Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, and holy moly, what a mammoth book. Today, I want to talk about why Rhythm of War is my least favourite book in the Stormlight Archive so far, and why I think people will dislike this book compared to other books. There may be some minor spoilers, but mostly it will be spoiler free. Before we get any further into this video, I just want to say there are some trigger warnings in relation to mental health issues. Sanderson has always been open about using the Cosmere itself to talk about some really heavy mental health topics, and this book is no exception. This book deals with some really heavy subjects, including suicide, depression, PTSD, and dissociative disorders. So let's jump straight into what I did like about this book, because I want to spend more time towards the end talking about why I didn't like this book as much and why you might not like this book as much as his previous Stormlight Archive novels. One of the major positives about this book is the actual production value of the product itself. Everything from the cover to chapter headings to the drawings inside and the maps that are inside the book itself are the equivalent to other authors' 10th anniversary or special editions. And it's something that you will find incredibly pleasing. It's something that increased my enjoyment of the book probably tenfold. Just being able to see what an ink spread, for example, for me being an Elsecaller, what an ink spread looks like. It's just incredible. Another major positive about this book, and it's something that we've found throughout the Stormlight Archive and the Cosmere so far, and I spoke about it just a little bit earlier before, but it's the way that Brandon so respectfully deals with mental health issues. In this book, there is suicide ideations, there's anxiety, there's PTSD, there's dissociative disorders. There's these major mental health issues that Brandon doesn't just fix using magic. He doesn't just make them fix in a situational setting. They are things that the characters deal with throughout this series and throughout the book, and it's something that can make it a tough read. There are portions of this book, even if you've only read the intro chapters or if you've read any Stormlight Archive book before, there are portions of this book where you just have Kaladin going through his stages of depression, and it can be a heavy read at times. It is physically heavy on your soul. And I have read multiple aspects where people are really stoked about this, people who have suffered with depression or know people that have suffered with depression or any of these disorders, and how incredibly true these ring to their own experiences. And for those people, I think being represented in this book is probably such a special feeling. I don't know, I don't suffer from any mental health disorders, but I know people in my life who have, and I wish they liked fantasy and that I could get them to read this book, because I think it must be an incredible read if you've got that type of a background. If you don't have that type of a background and you don't want to listen to a character go through the cycles of anxiety and depression and these other mental health disorders time and time again until they start to work through their issues, this book and the Stormlight Archive itself might be a bit of a heavy read for you, but God, it is so worth it. Honestly, if you can read your way through them, they are so special in this respect. Another major positive of this book is the way that characters like Dabbid and Rlain are fleshed out throughout this novel. We get bits of their story that we've never heard and that I never even expected to hear. Being side characters of Bridge 4 and not being major players in the story so far, I never expected to hear Dabbid's, especially his backstory, and Brandon has such a special way of making us care about characters that we didn't necessarily care about before, and this is one of those experiences for me, and one of the strongest parts of this book, even if it's only quite a small section of this book. Now, before I go into the negatives, I want to make a point here that this is a Sanderson book. This is a Cosmere book, and this is a Stormlight novel. Whilst I'm going to go into quite a few negatives surrounding this book from this point onwards, it is still an incredible, incredible read, and the Stormlight Archive is still my favorite series of all time. And so while you're listening to these negatives, please just keep in mind that I am being nitpicky and that Brandon has set such a high bar so far that I can't help but be slightly picky about things and still absolutely glow over how incredible this series has been so far and will be into the future. Again, before I go into the negatives, I actually want to talk about a few things that I didn't overly like and I didn't overly dislike. These are things that are a bit of a double-edged sword throughout the book that have meanings and have reasons that I can see, and I liked bits and I didn't like bits, that overall didn't fall into one category or another for me. The first time I read the novel, the flashbacks with Venli and her sister and the other singers were the weakest part of this book for me. I've heard a lot of people say that on their first read through. They just couldn't connect with these characters and didn't really care for them, and that was definitely me on my first read. Having just finished my second read, I found myself being more engaged with Venli's flashbacks in general. Again, Brandon has taken on a mammoth task of getting us to try and understand and be connected with so many different characters and from different species, different walks of life. Like, the task that he has taken on to try and get us to not only like Bridge 4, to like the Monarchy, to like Dalinar, Adolin, Navani, Yasna, Wit. He's now taking on this task of trying to get us to care for the singers, and wow, what a task it is. It didn't necessarily land completely for me, and still, again, second read through, reading some of these chapters, I just wanted to flick through to what was Kaladin doing, what was Bridge 4 doing, what were the characters that I'd already come to know and love, what were they doing? Speaking of characters that we've come to know and love so far, Kaladin and Shallan, these two have some absolutely mind-blowing payoffs towards the end of the book. I can entirely and fully empathise with people who are a bit sick and tired of seeing both characters slog through the same mental health issues that they have across the first three books, whilst I also completely empathise with Brandon as an author who is trying to give us an accurate and correct representation of how these issues affect people in their day-to-day lives. All right, let's talk about things that I didn't really like and that I think people will really dislike if you're watching this video. Brandon Sanderson has always spoken about having two sets of magic systems, a soft magic system and a hard magic system. This book is very much a hard magic system and it's very heavy. There are some scientific concepts. Gosh, there are some chapters where I have real flashbacks of listening to university lectures around light, sound waves, atomic theory. Navani's parts in this book are so heavy, hard magic, scientific based that I found them hard to get through as someone who's interested in science. And if you have no interest in science and you don't want to read a book about it, there are major parts of this book that you will just want to skip entirely through. And whilst these scientific discoveries that Navani is making throughout this book have major ramifications on the world that we've built so far and the world that we've come to know so far, I still think there are a lot of people who aren't going to enjoy reading it and who are going to miss major developments in that section because they don't want to listen to Navani do the same science experiments over and over. As I said, I enjoy scientific concepts. I enjoy reading about it. I've enjoyed studying about it in the past. And even for me, there are times in this book where, particularly towards the end of the book, where it is a heavy read at times. So yeah, I hope Brandon or 17th Shard or someone like that can develop a bit of a quick cheat sheet for people to be able to see these developments and understand their relation to the Cosmere itself, because I think it's going to be really necessary. That takes me into my next section, which is to saying that I don't think it's not going to pay off. I don't think that this information is useless. It's the complete opposite. I think this information has just built on what we've got so far. Some of it's completely changed foundations of what we've got so far. And I think it will be really important in the end of Era 1, being book 1 to 5, and particularly into Era 2 of books 6 to 10. But it's the same thing with the prologue of Way of Kings, there was a massive info dump there, and Brandon in lectures previously has discussed why he thought that was important. And whilst I agree with that prologue being important, and we learnt so many things from that, and it didn't take away my enjoyment from the overall series itself, I found this to be in line with the prologue of The Way of Kings, where Brandon has explained previously through his lectures that there was a reason, and he's explained the reason behind that, and it makes a lot of sense when you hear him talk about it. And I hope that what has been developed through this book has major payoffs down the line, and that when these other books are released, we can come back and read this book, read this part of Rhythm of War and go, oh, I see where this has all come from now. I understand it. I enjoy it. Yeah, but that's a complete hope. You can read this book on its own merits and just be like, wow, no, thank you. Science, no. Another small dislike for this book is how constrained the locations feel. Most of this book takes place in one location, and after the expansiveness of Oathbringer, where we got the Oath Gates and everyone was everywhere and we got these incredible locations, no, that's a spoiler. To be stuck in this situation in one location where everything's happening can make it feel a little bit constrained and a little bit less free than what previous books has. So let's just go into my overall thoughts. This book, Rhythm of War, book 4 of the Stormlight Archive, is still a Brandon Sanderson novel, and it's still a Cosme novel, and it is still an incredible book. With the size of it, there are always going to be parts that some people are going to like and some parts that people are going to dislike. And in a series this big and this expansive, there are going to be bits of books where it's necessary to set up future payoffs down the line. One of my thoughts and theories about book 5 is it's going to be very fast paced. And so I believe this book, being book 4, had to be a bit of a bridge where there was a lot of character development, a lot of theory development, a lot of things developed that will pay off in book 5. It's certainly on its own terms, on its own self-contained book terms, makes this quite a hard read, but I think it will make book 5 a much better pace, a much faster pace, a lot more things happening where we can just go, oh yeah, I get it, it makes sense. There are Cosme tie-ins. One of the major things I've got to talk about with this book before I finish is that Brandon has always talked about the fact that you could read the Stormlight Archive on its own and not miss the enjoyment factor by not having read the rest of the Cosme. And whilst I agree that you could read this book and there are things that happen and you could just be like, oh yeah, like that happened, there's that sword, that's cool, I don't really know what that means. Having read the rest of the Cosme and being able to find those Easter eggs and tie them into the overall story makes this a much more enjoyable read. I think you almost have to have by this book started to delve into the Cosme in order to fully appreciate what Brandon has done and what he will continue to do down the line. I don't think we can keep saying that these books are self-contained, and that's self-contained in that you don't have to have read the rest of the Cosme. I think at some point we're going to have to, and Brandon is going to have to admit that, read the Cosme. Just do it. Start with Mistborn probably, but read it, please. Again, there is so much of this book that I could discuss that involves spoilers, and if you want to hear that down the line, please let me know. But I don't even know how deep the rabbit hole goes, and that video would go for a really long and involved time. Even I, looking at 17th Shard, Copper Mine, like all of those different sites, am still blown away by the things that I don't know. There are factions in this book of the Ghostblood, Sons of Honor. Like, there is so many different factions, people spreading scientific theories to keep track of, that I'm so glad we have sites like that I can just Google, because I can't keep track of them all in my head. For now, the Stormlight Archive is still my favorite series of all time, but Rhythm of War is the weakest link in that for me so far. I still give this book a 7.5 out of 10 because it's still an incredible feat to have pulled off. It's an incredible read. The world building, the character development. There is so many, I cried at the end of this book. There are so many incredible moments. And so despite the fact I'm being very picky and there's a lot of negatives that I've spoken about throughout this video, it is an incredible, incredible book. I cannot wait for book 5, and after that, I can't wait to go into era 2 of these books. It's just going to be an incredible ride, and I'm really glad that I'm here to enjoy it as they come out, and I hope that you guys are also enjoying each one as they comes, and that we can appreciate that Brandon as an author is actually going to finish these books, because that is becoming more and more rare. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this review. Subscribe, like, comment down below what you thought of this book, and let me know what your theories are for book 5 going ahead. Cheers, guys.